Georgia's democratic progress and its Euro-Atlantic aspiration bothers Russia. That is why Moscow also targets the upcoming elections. To this end, the Transatlantic Commission has initiated the Pledge for Election Integrity. It is a global standard for a healthy and transparent electoral process. Since political leaders and candidates are on the front line of foreign interference, our Commission invites them to sign this pledge. But the audience for this pledge is not our Commission. It is the electorate of Georgia. The objective of the election pledge is to diminish the risk of interference and to increase the resilience of Georgian democracy against foreign meddling. Foreign meddlers know that candidates need to win, and some will work with almost anybody to get the extra edge. But with this pledge, we are asking candidates to say clearly that they will resist any direct or indirect assistance from foreign malign actors. In a nutshell, this is a pledge for any candidate wishing to run an honest and decent campaign. In the digital age, this includes not to use any data that has been falsified or stolen, not to spread doctored audio or video messages such as deep fake videos, to be transparent if automated accounts are used to spread messages, to keep your teams knowledgeable when it comes to cybersecurity of your campaign, and to be transparent about where campaign financing is sourced. As you can see, the pledge is very straightforward. And my message to Georgian parties and candidates is equally simple. Sign up. We launched this pledge for the first time ahead of the 2019 European elections, securing support from every EU Commission President candidate. We later extended it to the national elections in Canada, where all three major parties signed it. In the United States, Vice President Biden, also a former founding member of our Transatlantic Commission, has taken the pledge as presidential candidate, and we do invite President Trump to sign up as well. Today, we are pleased to say that we launch this pledge with many high-profile signatories already willing to sign. And this includes the 5 parties: Georgian Dream, European Georgia, Lilo for Georgia, Strategy Builder, and United Georgia. They have already signed the pledge. Of course, we hope that more parties will join our initiative by adding their name to this pledge, candidates and parties can make clear that their first priority is to defend Georgia's democracy, because Georgia's democracy needs to be defended by Georgian Democrats. Thank you.
Thanks to Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the chairman of the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity, and welcome to all of the viewers that we started getting both on Facebook and other social media platforms. Next on my speaker list, we again have the honor of being joined by the speaker, the chairman of the Georgian parliament, Archil Talakvadze, who will now also address his remarks. Speaker, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmussen, President Ilves, Madame Yaresko, dear moderators, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to you and the Alliance of Democracies, Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity, for this timely and important initiative. It's my privilege and great responsibility to join the pledge for election integrity, and this way further strengthen Georgia's democratic foundation. I am grateful, and my country, my people appreciates the support of international community and friends of Georgia, and it's my honor personally to thank you for your effort and engagement. We are committed to strengthen democracy, and it's one of the most important momentums Georgia makes step forward, confident step forward to strengthen its democracy. We've done, together with our society, fundamentally important democratic reforms in our country. And we have vibrant political discussion on that. And we had very close consultations with our international partners and institutions to have these important reforms completed. You are informed that we reformed and amended constitutional edition of Georgia, and country fully moved to the parliamentary governance system, which means that our people are given stronger democratic control over the government's operation and the governance process. And citizens have better access to the information, and citizens have stronger trust and stronger leverage through elections to elect their officials and complete government and participate in the process of the governance of the country. We've done important reform of the election system. In last 30 years, maybe generations of political parties were discussing about their will to have essentially proportional system in place and have the possibility for more pluralistic parliament, for better engagement in the political process. And Georgia learned its lessons of history. And we are proud that with the leadership of our government, we completed such an important reform as turning to the essentially proportional election system and fully election system later on. This is a tremendous improvement of the election system. We changed party finances system. And Mr. Rasmussen just mentioned about the funding of the election campaign. So we made brave decisions to have adequate funding and a fair funding to all political parties from the state budget, including so-called regressive formula, where not just the bigger political parties with the bigger public support get more funds So it makes them even more stronger, and small and new political parties are always left behind. But we introduced a system where, together with the proportional funding, new and relatively small political parties are getting additional funding to be in a competitive environment within established and traditional political parties. This way, we facilitated process of refreshing Georgia's political landscape, having more engagement and providing more choice to our citizens. And in this very light, of course, 2020 parliamentary elections, it's of significant importance to Georgia. And we realize our commitment. And of course, we are on edge to grasp a momentum where our country will benefit, strengthening its democracy. We are committed to demonstrate to our citizens, our society, and our international partners that Georgia continues democratic consolidation and Georgia continues to strengthen its democracy. We should not be surprised, as Mr. Rasmussen mentioned, more we deliver on democracy, more we deliver on economy and strengthening our democratic institutions, more undermining comes from Russia. And occupying 20% of Georgia's territories, of course, we get daily challenge and daily problems from Russia. Humanitarian situation, human rights violations, and daily provocations we have coming from these occupied territories. Two of Georgian regions, of course, undermine stability, undermine Georgia's economic growth, and undermine safety of our country. Though we believe that through the peaceful development, through the democratic development, through consolidation, international support from our partners, we will be able to unite and restore territorial integrity of our country. And we are pretty confident that Russia cannot define Georgia's future, but we define our future, and we are committed to democratic values we share with the Western society. We are proud of having remarkable progress on Georgia's European and Euro-Atlantic integration. The last 8 years, Georgia delivered to sign association agreement with the European Union. Georgia received free trade agreement with the European Union, and we have around 20% increase of our export to European markets. Georgia received remarkable trust from European family to have visa-free travel with the European Union. We are largest non-member contributor to NATO international missions. We are proud Georgian soldiers standing arm to arm to NATO soldiers in the most difficult spots of the world, defending liberty, democracy, and the security, the global security. And of course, we are proud that Georgia delivers on a daily basis to these values and delivers its commitments. And we have strongest ever cooperation and strategic partnership with our #1 ally, United States of America. And of course, behind this tremendous work is completed. And it's a work where civil society and government institutions, international partners, and private sector do together. And we are proud to have more integral society now. Of course, far more to be done, far more to be delivered. And as mentioned here, more we deliver, more challenges and more underminings we receive from the side of Russian Federation. It's a disinformation, soft power instruments, daily provocations from occupied territories, and attempt to undermine Georgia's democratic achievements. And we have clear vision, and we have confidence, and we are sure that with the great partnership, with strategic readiness to join NATO, with the progress to implement the association agreement with the European Union and in cooperation with the United States of America, and the most important, with the close engagement and participation of our citizens, we can sustain safety, security, and progress we've been making last decade. And this is something we value so much, and this is something we are the most committed to. Georgia remains a reliable partner to the West, and Georgian democratic institutions continue to strengthen. Of course, cybersecurity is an important issue, and we've seen several cyber attacks on Georgia's systems, and we are in a capacity development process now and closely contacting and closely consulting with our partners to strengthen our systems, to make it more secure, and to have strong reactive instruments to that. And of course, as a government, we are committed to provide diverse information and objective information to our public. And Georgia is one of the front runners on open governance partnership. We have better access to information provided to our citizens. We diversified media landscape of Georgia, and we gave full opportunity to our citizens through the democratic reforms, constitutional amendment, and the election reform to make informed choice and to have more trust in democracy and democratic elections. So in this very light, again, I'm privileged with a great responsibility to join this pledge for election integrity. And I'd like to appreciate and thank you for this initiative, for inviting Georgia to this platform and this initiative. I am sure that we will deliver fair, clean, and democratic elections. And this is a momentum which Georgia is strengthening further its democracy. Of course, we realize this is a path to the European and Euro-Atlantic integration. This is a path more resilient country, more pluralistic and result-oriented and cooperative political system. And this is something we have as a demand from future, from our generations who fought for democracy and liberty, and from the generations who actually expect better Georgia and better future of our country. So let me thank you again, and let me assure that we are committed and we will deliver another clean, democratic, transparent, fair elections now with an essentially proportional system. Georgia is more European now. Georgia is more resilient now. Georgia's institutions are stronger now, and we have vision. We are a future-oriented nation. We are a future-oriented team. And of course, in this very important times, your support, your engagement is as important as never. Thank you. Have a good day. And again, I'm honored to join this important conversation.
Thank you. Thank you to the Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Talakvadze. Thanks for those remarks, and thanks also, of course, for the support for our work and the election pledge. Next, I turn to former Estonian President Toomas Ilves, and who in this context is also an esteemed member of our Commission on Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity. So now the virtual floor is yours. And let me just reiterate to the journalists joining. I can see the questions starting to pop in, but but keep them going. It's in the Q&A function down on the sort of right side of your screen where you can see that. So please ask questions all along, and then they will be taken at the end of the remarks. Mr. Ilves, the floor is yours.
Well, hello, Georgia. I'm glad to be able to talk to you from up in Estonia today. You know, when it comes to disinformation, there's no real need to tell Georgians about it. Back in 2008, as you and we all know, that considerable efforts were made on the part of Russia to create a false picture of what was going on in Georgia. And in fact, we in Estonia actually sent a team down there to your country to help out in countering that disinformation. But that was toward the outside world, not into Estonia itself, or rather Georgia itself, sorry. And what we see now is that, and have seen in elections for, I'd say 5 years already, beginning at least with the referendum in the Netherlands in 2015, is that the Russians are trying to disrupt the internal environment for elections. And so what we find is that instead of having one electorate, the people voting in the country, you also have other people participating in the electoral process, and people who do not have the best interests of your country in mind. And so we've seen this happen. It's going on with Georgia right now, but it's gone on actually with almost every single election that has taken place in the transatlantic world in the past 5 years. The goal is to sow chaos. I mean, it may be to support one party or another, and you can make the claim that in the United States in 2016 that the Russians clearly were pushing for one candidate. But you know, you don't even have to push for one candidate. You can the goal can be to create chaos, the idea of instability, and at the same time, especially for our countries along the rim of Russia, to that the one stable, reasonable force is Russia. So, and we've seen this now spreading beyond elections. Coronavirus spread around the world, immediately followed from a pandemic to an infodemic, where you had a wave of information in social media, ranging from just simply stupid to very dangerous things that were being spread. And here we've seen that in addition to Russia participating in this process, China as well has gotten in on the act. Here in Europe, the EU Strategic Communication Unit has been tracking this and highlighted a number of cases of Russian disinformation. Fortunately, compared to, say, earlier times when we were not so alerted to disinformation, at this time around in both the realm of the pandemic, but also in terms of elections, be it the Georgian election, the US election, that we're a lot smarter and are alert to these processes. And of course, I've been saying for a while, the old Chinese proverb, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. It is our duty, it is our responsibility in every single way to make sure that our democratic processes and elections are free of external factors. Now, we see that even in the case of Georgia right now, that foreign interference is a serious issue. Facebook and Twitter have removed all kinds of accounts for so-called coordinated inauthentic behavior, which basically means that there are troll farms and other disinformation sources that are trying to disrupt the internal politics of your country. And most of these cases that we have found, at least in our part of the world, originate in Russia. And so we see this from US to Georgia. And clearly you have been a primary target of Russian interference and influence operations. And again, we saw this, you saw this in 2008, more directed out to the outside. And now you are the country they are targeting. So the problem with all of this disinformation is that new technologies are coming in. So if we had, which you can loosely call fake news, made up stories about what was going on, we now see with new technologies, with artificial intelligence, the development of deep fakes that can actually make up utterly fake pictures and movies. So you can imagine when what this can do to the political discussion if you say have a fake video of a politician saying something that he never said. And so right now that's our new task, be able to identify where identify these things and know what's going on. Clearly, I would also advise you here to look at the digital side of things, to make sure that you have digital literacy, that you in general develop an information literacy program. Certainly, we have, I guess in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, and Sweden, have paid more attention to these kinds of to this kind of education than other countries. Certainly, what I would recommend that has worked very well in our part of the world are actually civil society organizations that track disinformation, make it public. Because if no one points it out, then people might take it seriously. But if you have people who track and follow disinformation and fake narratives, that and then to publish this, make it known to the Georgian electorate that this is not true, that helps a lot. We see this all the time. I mean, in our countries as well. I mean, we have, because of the presence of NATO troops in our country, we are constantly bombarded, or rather the Russian press in our countries is constantly bombarded with fake stories about what the NATO troops are doing, what we're doing, and so forth. And I would certainly pay a special attention to the Russian language press in your countries for fake stories. It's a lot easier for them to provide or create that than it is to create in Georgian. And all with the goal of sowing chaos in your country. So in the context of today's launch of the election pledge, the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity is also introducing Disinformation Diaries. And this is a game-based media literacy tool where players can use to understand how disinformation, how deep fakes, how all of these information operations can concretely interfere in democratic elections. And the goal of the game is to increase media literacy for everyone who is interested. But it is a special offer, available only this week, from us to all political candidates and their staff, since it does touch upon election integrity, to help parties, candidates, staffs to develop practical skills for navigating disinformation. So you can look it up. Find the game on the website of the Alliance of Democracies Foundation, and I'm sure the URL will be posted here. And we will share the link here in the comment section as well. Before I end, I just want to say, as you probably have guessed, Georgia has been very close to my heart for a very long time. And I really want you guys to succeed. I'm there with you. Once we can travel again, I'll be there in person. Make this election count. Make it a real, solid, democratic election. I'm here for you. Estonia is here for you. The Transatlantic Commission is here for you. So go do it. Back to Jonas.
Thank you. Thanks, President Ylvis. Thanks for those remarks. I think shortly we will share, as you mentioned, the link for the Disinformation Diary. And even though you did a great sales pitch of saying only available for 1 week, you can also try it in 10 days time. So it will be on as a media literacy tool for the foreseeable future. Next, I turn to another of our commission members, Natalie Yaresko, the former finance minister of Ukraine, who has been so kind to join us from US time zone. So definitely it's very early, good morning, but I think the presidential debates have kept you sort of awake and live and kicking. But your thoughts, particularly also since Ukraine has sometimes been talked about as the ground zero of Russian interference as well. So you have experience on that as well. Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And when it comes to foreign interference in the past, I would like to talk briefly about Ukraine, where I've lived and worked as finance minister. The country's democracy has been constantly under heavy attack, and I'm sure the speaker can understand that from Georgia's experience. Most notably, the attack has been from Russia and its proxies, and these attacks are set to continue without end. The country has faced multiple cyber attacks, some of which were devastating to our infrastructure, including the electricity grid, banks, airports. Beyond the attacks on infrastructure, our elections have been targeted in very severe ways. But Kyiv took up the challenge and responded to the threat of cyber attacks by strengthening its cyber defenses in close cooperation with our international allies. Importantly, all relevant government agencies now treat cyber threats as a challenge that needs to be tackled with interagency cooperation. Furthermore, the Ukrainian government has prioritized the security of our Central Election Commission, and the Central Election Commission has received new equipment that was granted new personnel, and its staff has received very specific cyber defense training. We've learned our lessons, and we need to improve. Disinformation campaigns by foreign actors represent also a critical threat to Ukraine's democracy itself, not just the election process. These are attempts to confuse, to distract, to divide, in essence, to destroy confidence in our democracy. And as we know, disinformation is spread online, for example, through social media websites, as well as offline. Ukraine has taken many steps to limit these channels of disinformation. Perhaps most consequentially, it's banned a number of Russian websites that were used to spread disinformation amongst Ukrainians. Furthermore, Ukrainian officials have begun to invest in small-scale media literacy training campaigns, helping voters to understand what is disinformation. To this end, we, as the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity, in cooperation with selected knowledgeable local partners in Georgia, like the International Society for Fair Elections and Democracy, ISFED, or Transparency International Georgia, we've decided to conduct the so-called Election Risk Monitor after the elections, after the Georgian elections are over. And this monitor will be an evidence-based report which aims to assess and evaluate how Georgia, its various state and non-state actors, was prepared for the potential attempts to interfere with its elections. Our Transatlantic Commission published just such a report for the Canadian election in autumn of 2019, which you can find online in order to understand how it's presented. And we're convinced that this type of report in Georgia after the elections can provide some important insights about the elections and about Georgia's state of preparedness, because these elections are crucial, they're critical, but they're not the last elections. And so we hope that this report will help to improve the country's resilience for years to come in the future. Thank you.
Thanks to Natalie Oresco for those words. Now we move over to the Q&A part of this with the press. Let me reiterate, I mean, that this is of course the launch of the election pledge. So I'm happy already to see a lot of the questions as we expected on NATO, on some of them on very sort of domestic politics, but of course it's primarily about the election pledge. And let me say that you journalists that are participating here are important, not just in this case for reporting on the pledge, but also afterwards, because there is a question of enforcement of the pledge. And the way we've done in other cases has been through, of course, investigative journalists, through an active civil society. So if you see examples of transgressions of the 5 principles that Mr. Fogh Rasmussen outlined in the beginning, that's part of the pledge, then it's of course really also the duty of journalists to highlight that and say, hey, we are seeing this. So I think I wanted to underline that we also see journalists as an important part of enforcing such a pledge. But I'll now leave it to my colleague, Archil Talakvadze, who is taking the questions, including in Georgian, that appeared on the Q&A.
Thank you, Jonas. We received a number of questions here in the chat and on Facebook Live. So having them grouped according to relevance and the theme, I would like to ask the first question, which is directed to Mr. Rasmussen. The question comes primarily from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Georgian service, and it sounds as follows. How strong do you see the correlation of upcoming elections be held in high democratic standards and the speed of Georgia's NATO integration? And also the question coming from the Facebook, which is also related to this question, is that do you believe that Russian potential interference is an effort to halt Georgia's integration to NATO? Mr. Rasmussen.
Yes, first of all, let me stress that, of course, to organize free and fair elections at a high democratic standard, that is a prerequisite for joining NATO. However, having said that, I would also stress that this will not be judged upon the degree of foreign interference, but on the degree of the will and capability of the government of Georgia to counter this foreign interference. We would not let the Kremlin have the weapon to block Georgia's path towards the EU and NATO by just interfering or trying to interfere in Georgian elections. So that's my first point. Secondly, let me stress that Georgia already fulfills the strict criteria for applying for membership of NATO. The military standards, as the speaker mentioned, are already very high, very compatible with NATO standards, and a lot has been done. In the civilian sector to live up to NATO standards. So in that respect, you have prepared the ground. And my final point is to stress that we should not give Russia a right to veto a Georgian decision to apply for membership of either the EU or NATO. It's for the Georgians to decide that. And it's for Tbilisi and Brussels to decide the way forward for Georgia. It's not for the Kremlin. we should underline the principle that each and every sovereign state in Europe has an inherent right to decide its alliance affiliation herself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question comes from, again, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, but also Tivim Tabari's question is thematically very connected, so I will group them together, and it goes to Mr. Talakvadze, Mr. Chairman of the Parliament of Georgia. So the question is, how do you evaluate the state effectiveness of timely addressing the effects of violation of fair and decent competition in the pre-election period? Mr. Talakvadze.
Thank you for the question. I commented on this yesterday, and I'd like to share my comment on this to all of you and our partners and colleagues. We will not allow to anyone and any political group in our country to damage the trust and the positive environment of this election. As I mentioned, we introduced and we completed fundamental democratic reforms, including constitutional reform in the election system reform. We made stricter rules to avoid and prevent violence or any negative campaign during these elections. We made all steps possible to decrease the volume of polarization during these elections. So the political will is very clear from the government side that we will not allow to anyone in this election and during the pre-election campaign to damage the elections and the trust and make it again polarized. We've seen this in Georgia, and we have very consistent recommendations received from our partners, including the international observation missions. So we implemented those recommendations in the legislation, and I can tell you, as a Speaker of the Parliament, that law enforcement and all relevant authorities have full support of legislature to react, investigate, and prevent such an incidents. That would be my answer as a Speaker of the Parliament, main political and law-making institution in Georgia. Now, I'd like to make a political comment on this as a member of the Political Council of Georgian Dream Party, the ruling party, and one of the leaders and the members of our political team. I can tell you that we have remarkable achievements as a country, as a state during the last decade. Georgia managed to deliver and improve freedom of and independence of media in this country. We've been 105 on international ranking during 2004, 2012, and we are now 64 on ranking. We've been actually on a judiciary independence ranking 89, following the Fraser's Institute, and we have 66 now. We managed to double funding for education in our young generation. We almost tripled funding for the healthcare system, and all public opinion polls, incredible sources, right now say that the ruling party has solid support of the community. It's around 56%. So we are in the middle of the campaign. We have positive campaign. We are presenting our leaders to the public. We have strong program presenting to the public. It's about economic growth. It's about recovery from the damage of COVID-19. It's about the environment protection. It's about judiciary. It's about upgrading Georgia's social and economic infrastructure. So I don't see any logic behind that the ruling party, Georgian Dream in this country, can be interested having such an incidents during the election campaign. So I assure you, as for from law enforcement, reaction was immediate yesterday. We will closely follow to have these cases investigated, because the violence have no party. Violence have no political ownership. And of course, we as a ruling party are committed to maintain Georgia's election campaign positive, constructive, peaceful, and free. We've done our maximum to handle and manage situation regarding the COVID-19, and you journalists are well aware that Georgia, despite the global challenge of epidemics and pandemic, have no restriction on the political activity and the campaigning in Georgia, and government is doing its best to ensure safe environment for any political party planning and implementing its campaign, meeting the communities and presenting their plans and leaders before the elections. So I assure you that no one will be given a chance to shadow Georgia's democratic elections, especially in this very important moment when we are shifting to the election essentially proportional system, and Georgia is on this important transition, having fully parliamentary governance and having this advanced democratic political system in the election. So of course, we count very much on the coverage of media, on engagement of civil society, watchdogs, and I can tell to my partners and colleagues here that I personally addressed to the European Parliament, chair of the European Parliament and the president of the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly to support Georgia and deploy largest possible observation missions on the ground for these elections. And we are grateful that our European colleagues considered this. We are grateful that the United States of America and the Congress is also expected readiness to deploy the mission of international observers in Georgia. So as a political party, as a government, as a team which is future-oriented, we are very much interested to have largest international representation during these elections, and we welcome any party having a will to observe Georgian elections, and we will create maximum safety and maximum support for this activity. We declared this, and we've done practical steps to meet these requirements. So that would be my answer, and I think again we have clearly to deliver message to our society that violence have nothing to do and have no place in these democratic elections, and we have to react very consolidated against any case of violence during the campaigning. Though at the conclusive note, I have to tell you that overall political campaign, election campaign is running in a free, positive environment, and polarization and level of tension during the political parties is much less and considerably less than any previous elections. And we will do our best with your support to maintain this constructive environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the next question, before I switch to other commissioners, again goes to Mr. Rasmussen. This is two questions to group together, coming from one TV and coming from a Facebook Live. So don't you think the signatories of this pledge going to be anyways pro-European, pro-democratic political parties and similarly minded political candidates who want aid Russia to meddle? And also, what do you think will be sanctions for those who take the pledge but violate the principles? How do you keep parties and candidates accountable? Thank you.
First of all, I would like to stress that the pledge is an invitation to all parties, irrespective of their political stance, be they pro-Russian or pro-European or pro-this or pro-that or anti-something. We invite all candidates and all parties to sign the pledge. So it's really a bipartisan effort to ensure free and fair, open, transparent elections in Georgia. Next, on the sanctions, if I understand the question, if a party or a candidate who have signed the pledge violate the terms of the pledge, what would be the sanction? Again, I have to stress, this is not, we don't have legal measures to punish people who violate this pledge. But I think and I hope that the real and most severe sanction would be the sanction of the voters. We know from other countries and from other elections that if people have signed up to the terms in the pledge, and if they violate the pledge, even if they do not want to sign the pledge, then voters will be suspicious and maybe they won't vote for that party or that candidate. And ultimately, that would be the most severe sanction against a party or a politician who violates the terms.
Thank you. And last two questions. One goes to Mr. Ilves, another to Ms. Yaresko. So the question to Mr. Ilves also comes from Radio Liberty and asks, what would be your main advice to Georgians to stay firmly on the way towards NATO integration? And how do you see the perspective of direct dialogue with Russia? And the question to Ms. Yaresko sounds as follows. Who plays a leading role in fighting against the disinformation and strengthening states' resilience in Ukraine? Is it state or civil society? Thank you. Mr. Ilves, over to you.
For integration into the EU and NATO, the most important thing, of course, is to stay the course. The most important part, first and foremost, of course, is also remaining a liberal democracy, which means free and fair elections. That is most important, free and fair elections. Rule of law, so no kind of special deals for anyone. Respect for human rights, and that means respect for everyone's human rights, not just the select group. And if those are the minimal conditions, and of course from there on in it gets more specific regarding a whole host of matters regarding reforms you've done, how effective they are. I need to say that for years now, almost 10, Georgia has made spectacular efforts in corruption reduction. So I'm always proud to look at Georgia when I look at the Transparency International list ratings of corruption. That you should keep doing. And on top of that, keep your economy open, free, and work on all the things that you hear from the EU representative in Tbilisi. Now, the second question, what to do about Russia, dialogue with Russia? Well, this is not going to be popular, but I would say at this moment, given their behavior, I would be in listening mode. you can see that they have been exceptionally aggressive in the last 2-3 years, beginning with the Trump administration, when they think that they can do almost anything they want, and have been doing almost anything they want, even in the United States, in the crudest fashion. So I would say that listen to what they say. Don't make any concessions at this point. And if we have a somewhat different US administration in the future, then I think that support for Georgia and an understanding of what Russia is about will increase dramatically. Of course, that if you don't have a new president, then in the United States, then who knows? But in any case, the point is that this is not a time to begin negotiations or a dialogue. Wait until next year and see how things develop from there, when Putin is no longer dealing with the incredibly good hand he has right now. Well, that's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
to the question of who has the more important role, whether it's the administration or civil society, I actually can't grade one as more or less important. They both have uniquely valuable roles to play. And I think they both need to play their individual roles. The state has to play the role in cybersecurity. The state administration has to play the role in, for example, election finance, transparency. But civil society has a broad mandate, without which I don't think we can fight disinformation successfully. That's monitoring, that's proving literacy, that's enabling citizens to be aware. And I think that the combination of the state and civil society together, working in unison, each in their own sphere, is the only way that we can succeed in fighting disinformation and ensuring that the people make their own choices in their own democracy.
Okay, I think we also.
Thank you. Yeah, over to you.
Jonas here. Thank you, Mariam. We are coming to a close here of our press launch by the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity of our election pledge for the Georgian elections. As for Rasmussen underlined in the beginning, we already have 5 parties that have signed up and candidates. So we're of course very excited about that. But as he also underlined, I mean, our effort is one that goes beyond party politics. So we would love to see all parties and candidates sign up. So this is basically a way of strengthening democratic institutions by signing up to the election pledge, and has no sort of bearing on where you position yourself otherwise politically. Also want to underline to the journalists that this is of course the launch today, but we're open for questions along to the Transatlantic Commission. So we've established now a dialogue, and also want to underline that we need you for the element of public accountability. As was said, it's of course the voters of Georgia that will keep candidates on their toes. Do they actually live up to these 5 principles when they sign the pledge? But it's of course also civil society, and it's of course also journalists. So we hope you will use this maybe both to ask the candidate that have signed what they actually do to make sure they live up to it, but also ask the candidates that haven't signed yet why they haven't done that. So in that sense, we also count as you as an important part of Georgia's democracy and of the launch of this pledge. So with that, I would just want to thank all of our speakers, I would say particularly from Tbilisi, who joined us, the chairman of the parliament. Thanks for your participation. So for now, we will say goodbye, Georgia and Tbilisi, but we will stay with you through this election and work through this election pledge to make sure that your election to 31st of October become both democratic and great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your engagement. Thank you. Have a good day.